Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Simplify Church podcast.
Yeah.
And we are so grateful that you are here with us. So excited to get to have the conversation that we're going to have today. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been spending some time, hopefully giving some really practical discussion and conversation to help you think deeply about just life and ministry, and hopefully maybe give some helpful resources along the way. That's always our goal. And so I'm super excited for us to get to dive into what we're going to talk about today, talking about building a leadership team when you're all alone. Whether you're the lead pastor and you're the solo pastor, or you're the kids ministry director, but it's just you, and you're trying to figure out how to build that team around you. We're going to be talking about how to do that, how to begin to think through that process, and then hopefully give you some helpful takeaways along the way to get you going. But before we do that, we always like to take just a couple of minutes and touch base with one another. And so, as always, I'm joined in the studio by the one, the only Mike Whittemore. Mike, how are you, my friend?
That's me. What's up, dude? I'm well, man. Well, I'm well, all things considered, right? That I have control over. Life is fine. Everything's okay. I'm going through something pretty significant today, and I want to take this opportunity to share it with you because I think it's good to do what Scripture tells us to do, and that we share one another's burdens.
All right, so lay it on us.
Okay, so I'm struggling today in a pretty significant, profound way because I've just recently discovered that the Cincinnati Bengals are probably going to be releasing T. Higgins, and I don't know what to do. My calls and emails and letters have fallen upon deaf ears. The contract option has not been extended in a way that probably should have been, and here we are in free agency land, and the Bengals are just sitting on the bench doing nothing. So it's a hard day. It's a hard day for a Bengals fan. So really struggling here, trying to see where things are going to go heading into what I was hoping was going to be a fantastic season. So I'm a mess emotionally over it. I mean, I don't know if you can even console me. Honestly, I don't even know how to move forward today, but I think for the greater good of what we're trying to accomplish, I'm going to try to press on.
Well, we're going to appreciate that you would do that, and even in your grief, that you would join us on today's show. But I just have one question: Are you talking about Major League Soccer?
All right, that's all the time we have. Thank you. Before I go, there will be an opening available for another co-host of this show. Unbelievable, Greg. I understand that you live in a town that has been robbed not once but twice of the beautiful luxury that is the National Football League. I understand that that's happened to you, but that doesn't equate to you living so out of touch. I mean, we're talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. Okay, so listen,
isn't it the Bengals?
Oh, Lord help me. Okay, all right. You know, Greg, you're supposed to be my friend. You're supposed to take me from this place of hurt and woundedness into a place of hope and promise. I'm
just trying to tell you that there are other people who are there for you, but don't have a clue what you're talking about. So that's all I'm trying to lay out there for you. But in all reality, I do feel your pain, and
you do.
I do. Because because I am that empathetic person who sees people in their need, and who tries to come along and say, but here's the silver lining.
Okay, give it to me. I need
ready for the silver lining.
Let's go. Write it down.
The silver lining is baseball season has started.
This is true.
Okay. And it looks like the Reds are going to be decent.
I know. I am excited.
And it's one of those things that it would not be outside the realm of possibility for them to finish in the top third of the division. So you got things to get excited about, even in the midst of your heartbreak over
my suffering.
Your suffering and enduring the poor choices of the front office of
I don't know what's
Bengals.
happening, my man. It is an absolute disaster, but I don't want to spend this whole episode unpacking the shenanigans that is taking place there, because I could, and I really want to, but I don't know if this is the forum for that. And I think for the greater good, I'm going to move on. But I do want to know how things are going for you. Are you struggling this week? Do you have anything I can make you feel worse about? Maybe, I don't know, anything I can throw some salt into?
Yeah. So
isn't that the Christian way?
It is.
You know,
it is.
How are you hurting? Oh, good. Can I make it worse?
Hey, it is what it is.
Oh my gosh.
No, man, things are pretty good. Feeling it hardcore after the dreaded daylight savings.
Oh yeah.
Time change yesterday.
Yeah.
Dragon today pretty traumatically. To the point of I thought about writing my congressman and saying, would y'all get it together and cancel this whole daylight savings thing?
It's unnecessary. This is the dumbest thing that we still do as a culture. And I don't understand, for all the things that people get up in arms about, we're still allowing this to continue. Yeah. It should be like this great bipartisan thing that we link arms around, and shut it down.
An easy win, and both sides could claim it.
Everybody wins. Everybody wins when they stop messing with the time. I don't get it, man. Yeah, I mean,
and all of the parents of toddlers,
yeah, my goodness,
said amen and passed the fried chicken.
Well, that's good, man. You know what? I hope you sleep miserably tonight too. So there you go.
It's a good possibility.
Yep,
it's a good possibility.
Yeah, man. When you get over 40, dude, like having a good night's sleep is that's a gift, not an expectation. So that's just the way it goes, unfortunately, regardless of what's happening with the time. But no, it's good, man. Yeah, and it is always tough, those time change Sundays and stuff, and but here we are yet again, and many of us waking up on a Monday trying to get back to the busyness of things that we're called to, prepping for Easter, all that kind of stuff. The spring calendar into the summer, what we're going to do there, and next thing you know, it'll be fall, and we're trying to ramp back up again. So the ever-ending cycle of ministry, and it is never more of a burden at times than when you realize you're doing it alone. And that's a really hard place to be. Even when we've got folks that we can talk to, we've got folks in our corner, we've got resources like this, incredibly put together podcast. There are times where the burden of doing ministry alone is just, it's a lot. And there are times where in our conversations, our content is driven toward folks that are in some way or in some shape or form are leading some other folks, whether it's a small team or a few teams, whether you're leading an elder board or you're leading a few staff members, or you've got a few folks under you on a team. And that's, that's certainly the case in a lot of churches, but there are also a fair amount of congregations out there that are being led by one or two folks at the most. And man, it is a huge burden to carry around. And so that's why we thought today's episode would be so applicable, and really a great piece of evergreen content that'll stay out here that folks can come back to and can share with other people that are going through this, especially if at some point you find yourself in a multi-staff environment, then, you've got friends that are still kind of in the trenches flying solo. And you can send this to them and say, hey, here's some encouragement for you as you get through this. And so, yeah, we want to talk about, what it's like to build a leadership team when you're all alone. Greg, I'm curious, in your experience of ministry and all the years and places that you've served, have you found yourself in a place where there's just one or two of you on staff, or have you always been kind of in a larger multi-staff environment?
Yeah. So I've kind of run the gamut and been on, the staff where there's just one other pastor. I was a volunteer for a long time. And so know what that looks like, and then been, on staff at churches with, a dozen or so staffers. And then my current church, we've got about 5 or 6 folks that are on our staff to varying levels. And so, it is something that is totally normal. Hopefully that as we're talking through this today, there'll be that helpful way to kind of process that is scalable, whether it
Yes.
is just you, or it's you and one or two key volunteers or one other staff person or whatever it might be. Some scalable truth and suggestions that will allow for you to kind of work through this developing of a team.
Yeah, that's good, man. I've been in the same boat myself over the years when I've served in ministry and in different churches, different sizes, where it has been just, man, my first preaching gig was at a super tiny church. And oh my gosh, man, just thinking back to then, I was the only person, and I was part-time and going to school and doing all that kind of stuff. And it was very isolating and very lonely. And just at times, like I would drive out to the office and sit, and it would just be like eerily quiet in the building, and you think, my goodness, this is really tough. And then like you, man, other times I've served where there's been, upwards of 30 or plus people on staff. And then it's just like, oh my goodness, it's just, there's always something going on.
Yeah.
But I think it's important in this conversation that as we talk through some of these suggestions and ideas, and again, that's always our aim, is to be practical, right? But I think, Greg, you hit it right on the head, bud. And it's got to be scalable. It's got to be scalable. You got to be able to take this and look at your situation and go, how can I apply this? And then make it your own, right?
Mm-hmm.
The whole point of what we tried to do here is to at least initiate a conversation for you and the folks that you're talking to, the folks that you're accountable to, the folks that you're casting vision to. And it's you have to make this your own. And so the idea is to give you some inspiration to know that you're not alone and that we're in the trenches with you as we're trying to always, talk about subjects and conversations that are applicable in that way. And so I think that is important to state out front. And I think also, and I'm really excited for you to speak about this, man, but is just, as we do talk about some of these things, what are the pitfalls that we need to avoid? What are some of the guardrails that they're going to need to go into place so that this process is effective and fruitful and doesn't end up creating a monster that is unintended? Because it absolutely could. It absolutely could get to that place. And so the thrill of, man, we're going to build a team when we don't have a team, and then we don't really think about those things down the road.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about some of that too today. But I think on the outset, having said that, I think the first point that I'd like to make, or at least draw our attention to, is we've got to identify what type of team do we need to build in order to not just maintain where we are, but where we want to go. And so what kind of help do you need? And so I think it's important to get on a whiteboard or a tear sheet or something, some sort of piece of paper where you can begin to outline, okay, here's kind of where I could use some help in managing what I've got going on right now. But here's where we really want to go. And so what type of team do I need to build around me? What type of people do I need? What type of gifts? What type of personalities do I need around me that will help us not just stay where we are, certainly help us manage where we are, but also to where we want to go. And I think that's going to be really, really important. Greg, from your seat, man, if you're the only guy, so let's just kind of put ourselves in this position here. If you're the only guy, you're leading a church, it's a church of, let's just say 75, 80 folks, and it's just you. Maybe you've got a part-time worship leader that kind of helps out. You throw them a couple $100 a week, college kid. Maybe you've got somebody who's served as like a church administrator or a secretary, and she's been there, since really the Nixon administration, and getting things to change and stuff can be really challenging. But she's, super, super part-time. Really, she's donating her time more than anything.
Right.
When you think about being in that position, what would you need at first? What kind of people would you need at first to come in and be around you to help you just manage the overall ministry that you have? I mean, assuming that you're trying to have a church that is accomplishing the basic rhythms of a church, like, with the basic programming, with having some children's ministry, having stuff for family, having those Bible studies, having a little bit of outreach and community involvement, some of those basic, kind of rhythms. What is some help that you think you would need right away to just manage where you're at, not even considering where you're going?
Sure. So I think probably what I would begin with, like you said, I'm like you. I need to write things out and begin to see them, to be able to clearly say, okay, yeah, this is where we are. This is where we'd like to be. And so I would just start at the whiteboard, and I would say, I would begin to put down the things. Okay, these are the areas that are easy for me, that are they're strengths that I almost don't have to think about.
Okay. That's good.
And I would start there. And then I would list the weaknesses to say, okay, if I'm honest, here are the areas that I'm not good at, that I need people to help me with. And then begin to assess, how do those two things compare, and how do they get in the way of what I'm trying to do as the leader?
Oh man, that's really strong, dude.
Because I can't do everything.
Nope.
As much as I want to be Superman, as much as I want to be able to handle everything, I can't. And so being able to say, okay, what are the things that only I can do? And then what are the things that I'm good at that I don't really have to think about to get done? And then what are the things that are just, I'm either terrible at, or they take up so much time and energy that I can't do the things that I need to do, and begin to make that list, so that then I can start to look for people who can help me with those things. Because I think if we're honest, like, a lot of the stuff that takes up so much of our time in ministry, it's not actually ministry work. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that requires shepherding and pastoral thinking and exercise. It's just stuff that has to be done. It's good stuff. It's important stuff, but it's not things generally that only a pastor can do, or only the main leader of the group can do. And so what are those things that only I can do? And then what are the things that I can pass off to other people, and kind of get that list going, knowing that it's going to shift and it's going to ebb and flow. And there may not be somebody who can take that off my plate, but if I at least have given it a name and said, okay, this is a reality, then I can begin to look for people who can help me with that. And then my next step would be, I would be leveraging that ministry assistant who's been in the church for 400 years, who knows everybody, to be able to say, okay, here are my needs. Who can help me with this particular need? And just start going down the list. And begin to see who do we have who can help with this, who can walk with this. And then the hard part becomes figuring out how to begin to let them serve.
Right.
And like you said, but giving them enough guardrails where they don't get hurt, and the church doesn't get hurt, and I don't get hurt, because things, flew off the track because we didn't create those guardrails to keep everybody moving the same direction.
Yeah, and even in that process of trying to identify what the things are that you're good at, and where you have some weaknesses or areas that just are life-taking and not particularly life-giving, there's even something to be said here of doing some personality profiling for yourself.
100%.
Leveraging some of these resources that are out there, like Servants by Design, some of the stuff that like Stephen Boster does, and a few of these other organizations that are out there, but where you can really begin to understand yourself better. Because I mean, in all reality, man, like, no one lies to you in life more than you. Right? And so we can easily deceive ourselves into thinking that, well, I am the only person. They do pay me to do a lot around here, and I want it to be done a certain way. And so we begin to build a complex, and we begin to build walls around what we're doing, instead of like building bridges to helping people come on to, the shore, so that they can help shoulder some of the responsibility. So doing some of that, that personality profiling can be really helpful, and not to get too far in the weeds of it. Like, I'm not a big Enneagram guy or any of that kind of stuff, but I know some folks are big on the Enneagram, and that's not me. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it necessarily, but that's just not me. I don't really function that way. I like more nuts and bolts. I like more clearly communicated, and I'm old school, man. I'm 100 years old. So I go the old school, like Myers-Briggs and some of those other things, and to help me kind of identify some of this stuff. So I think there's a portion of that could be really helpful. And I think also, as you begin to realize some of this stuff, and you're making those lists of areas you're strong in, areas you're weak in, areas you need to offload, I think one of the smart things to do is, as you're identifying some of these needs, is to create like a tiny little job description and a tiny little profile for the type of person that you're looking for that can help in this. So let's just say, for example, Greg, that in this role, one of the things, and this is not you at all, but if it were you, is someone who struggles with the administrative side of things, right? I mean,
Sure.
you are super gifted with administrative stuff. There are people that are not, and
Sure.
that people would be me. I do it, but it's not something that I enjoy. So if you have a little bit of a job description, a little bit of a profile that says, I'm looking for people to help some internal communications, okay, with our church, then you write down a little bit of a description on the kind of person that this person would be, would be proficient with, technology and yada, 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 and well-spoken and understands, communication mediums. And the job description would be this person would send out one weekly email blast to all of our folks and would help be able to craft our weekly handout if we have one. And then maybe you build on that. Like now it's doing a little bit of website work, a little bit of social media content, things like that. So you can begin to put these things out it's so much easier to have a profile put together so that when you're looking for someone to fill in any of these roles to help you maintain the ministry that you have, it's just so much easier to sit down and have a conversation with people because the profile begins to allow for folks to weed themselves out. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So I think there's a lot of benefit into that. And so I think, that first step is deciding, who are the people that you need? What are the positions that you need? What's the help that you need in order to maintain where you're at? And then secondly, you have to then make it known that you're looking. And this is where a lot of people fall apart is they get the idea that they need help and they want to get help. And yeah, they go talk to the admin or they go talk to somebody and, well, I don't really know anybody that can help with that. I mean, I hear that all the time. Like, hey, do you know anybody that could? And then, no, not really. And then we get defeated.
Yeah.
And then, and then we just feel like, oh, well, I guess it's just something I'll just keep doing and burn myself out. So then we get to this place where we still need to make it known that we're looking. What are some ways that we could do that? Like, what are some ways that we can make people aware that we're looking to get some help in these areas?
Yeah. So I think that one area to do that is, if you've created those job descriptions, even if they're super brief and they're just, 3 or 4 bullets of this is what we're really looking for. And then maybe 1 or 2 like personality type traits that person needs to, hey, they need to be a self-starter, or, whatever,
right.
Knowing your leadership style and what you need, being able to bullet that out. And then like, perhaps it's you have some kind of like a ministry fair at your church.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And you say, hey, here are just some things that would really help us if we had some people who were good at these things to come alongside and join our team as a volunteer, or maybe it's as a a very part-time person, or maybe it's if it's a social media or a content creation kind of thing, maybe it's a contracted deal where it very much is, hey, we pay you $100 a month and you give us 10 Facebook posts or whatever. I don't know.
Sure.
But building out some of those things, and then presenting it in that way where you're making it known to your people, but you're not begging anybody to serve. You're also not really like twisting somebody's arm to obligate them. But another place that I found great success, it does take a little bit more work and you've got to be patient. But how can you leverage students in your church?
Oh yeah, that's good.
Whether they're junior high and high school kids or college students, like how can you leverage them? Especially when you're talking about like social media or graphic content or things like that, or even like things like, I'm the only guy on the team, and so I'm taking care of the bathrooms and mowing the yard. In addition to being the pastor. Can you find a college student or a high schooler that you can pay $50 a month to come and mow the yard once a week or once every other week or whatever it is? Like, are there creative ways that you can engage students in what you're doing?
Yeah.
It does take a little bit more work, but it's paid huge dividends for me over the years.
Yeah, and I think to that point, man, like sometimes you just have to be willing to make the need known.
Mm-hmm.
And there are oftentimes people in your church that they want to help. They don't know where they help or where to help or where they can help. And a lot of times in church, we only invite people to serve in those very classic ways. You know, it's folks working on the hospitality team, folks working on the worship team, folks helping out with, kids ministry and stuff like that. But there are a slew of other folks, I've known some guys that that want to serve. They want to serve behind the scenes, and they don't have a ton of time to give. And so they were asked to be a part of a facility team where they would just come together for special projects. Right, this needs to get built. This classroom needs repainted. We need a cart put together. We need, we got to hang a new screen, whatever it is. And those guys serve on that team, and that's all that they do. And so they may end up having 5-6 projects a year that they come together on, but it's one and done. They get it done and they go back in the saddle until they're needed again. And I think that sometimes you have to be willing to make the need known, and you've got to be willing to get creative. I love that idea, man, about encouraging students to step up and serve in these things. And so I think part of that is kind of, it dovetails perfectly into this third idea, is that we have to be willing to give away authority. Mm-hmm. And giving away authority means we have to be willing to give up control. And in ministry, man, giving up control, especially if you're a type A type of person, giving up control is really hard to do, because we're trying to create some level of perceived excellence, right? That like, this is the standard by which I think things should work. And we don't feel like anyone can really do it to that degree. So then we just continue to try to hold on and white knuckle that control over it. And instead of recognizing that, yeah, man, like, geez, is the grass going to get cut exactly how you think it should get cut? When you got 2 high school kids out there, no. I joke around all the time that my oldest son, he for a couple of years was in charge of like mowing the grass. That was one of his chores in order to earn his chore money. And he'd get out there and mow, and I try to show him, like, so I go out there and fix it. Now this time, when you weed eat, try it like this. And so at one point I just kind of jokingly said, like, you should start a mowing company and just call it Most of It Mowing. We're going to come out there and we're going to mow it. We're going to mow most of it, and just like, but that's the way it is, like, could I get out there every Saturday and mow that grass? Yes, I sure could. But then I'm robbing him of an opportunity to learn a skill. And it's more than just cutting grass. Like, there's a lot more at play here. Right.
Sure.
And so as a church, you may be grafting in a lot of Most of It type of people, and that's got to be okay. You got to be willing to let go of some authority on that, and then teach and instruct and guide along the way. And so much of that is just giving away of authority. And I don't know about you, man, but like, I feel like this is, I mean, it's a much larger conversation, but I feel like this is a common issue that I see in churches, is that there's just an unwillingness to let go of authority. Mm-hmm. Do you see that? Do you think that's a problem? And like, where do you think that comes from?
Man, I feel it. And I think this is true regardless of the size of your church. Of how do I turn loose of control, but at the same time ensure that there's accountability. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, especially if I'm the only pastor, the only staff member, at the end of the day, the buck stops with me.
Yep.
And so if I'm giving you authority, if I'm entrusting to your care, whatever. Yeah, but if you don't get it done, at the end of the day, the buck stops with me.
It's true.
And so I have to be able to balance that. And I think that's what gets so hard. And I think it probably is even harder in the single staff role than in the more leaders, more staff, because there is some more clarity there in the eyes of the church as a whole, and in the eyes of the staff, to be able to say, yeah, but this is really the only area that I'm responsible for. And so I can free up some of that and delegate some of that, knowing that there is a limit to how much rolls back to me. And so figuring out, how do we give away authority, but at the same time, build in that accountability. When, I mean, you use the example of your son. Okay. So at the end of the day, when he mowed some of the yard or most of the yard, or there was not only a conversation about, okay, well, I'm not paying you to mow most of the yard. I'm paying you
Right.
to mow all the yard.
Yep. Every time.
And so go out there and finish the job, and then I will pay you.
Yeah, I don't know how many times, man, those shoes would come off and go in the garage, and it'd be like, I'm done. I'm gonna go take a shower. And I'd walk and look out the back window and go, put your shoes back on. Sure. And you could just hear this audible.
Yeah. And it's one thing when you're paying somebody to do a job. It gets exponentially harder when they're volunteering their time.
Yeah.
And
you got to be willing to invest the time into those people, man.
And to be able to walk it out and say, okay, yeah, is this a personal thing that I just have to get over because it's just not the way that I do it?
Right.
Or, hey, you're really not getting it done. And I think you can. I'm confident in your ability to do it. But let's get after it and let's do it right.
And that's why having those little, like even those just limited job descriptions and those little bullet points of responsibility are so critical, because it gives you an objective way to measure how things are performing.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's super subjective. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, mowing a yard's one thing because that's pretty objective. It's like, did you get all the grass or did you get some of the grass? Right. But in some of these other ways, it's not that clear. And and that's why you've got to be willing to do the work on the front end of identifying where you need help and identifying the type of people that you need and identifying what you're asking them to do and then giving them authority to do it. And then you have to, and that's the other part of this, is you've got to be willing to invest the time to actually sit down and work with people. I mean, if you can't make that pivot in how you're leading and how you're performing in ministry, then you're always going to get stuck in the exact same place that you're at. Yep. So at some point, the decision has to be made of, I'm going to have to restructure how I think about ministry and time and start investing more of that time into the people so that I'm building out a culture of volunteer leadership development. Yep. And that is going to be wildly important in this process of being able to, move from being someone who feels like you're all alone into having a team mentality. And that's going to go a long way, because that will affect the overall culture of your church if given enough time, if given enough space to breathe. But yeah, there's going to be certain things that are done in ways that you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't post it like that. You wouldn't design a graphic like that. You wouldn't put the bulletin together like that. You wouldn't put the worship set together like that. But there's got to be a lot of that. You got to give away some of that authority. You got to let go of some of that control so that other people can do the things that they're called to do. And sometimes that's just a matter of inviting people into it and reminding them of what you're asking them to do, but also be willing to have hard conversations. Yep. Right. Yep. Because this can go sideways. Yep. People can take more authority than they've been given. And people can go in a direction with stuff that you're not asking them to do. So what do you do when that happens? What do you do when you have to put the brakes on a little bit? When you do have to remind people some guardrails? How does that play out?
That is the $1 million question.
Yes, it is.
And I think
why you're answering it.
Yeah. I think some of it comes down to having that relational equity to be able to know, based on who the person is, what the action step is. Okay, maybe we've asked you too much. Like maybe we've put too much on you as a volunteer, or even as a staff person or whatever. We've put too much on your plate. So let's reevaluate that. Is that what guardrail we need to kind of pump the brakes a little bit and say, we gave you one too many projects, and so you just went full throttle because you thought you had too many things on your plate to get done, or whatever. And so knowing who your people are, to be able to know how to navigate and what guardrails they need. I was just having a conversation just a few minutes before we jumped on. For some people, the guardrail is going to be brakes. It's going to be, how can I pump the brakes on you just a little bit so that you don't run ahead too far? And for other people, the guardrails are going to be the accelerator.
Oh yeah.
You're not moving. You're not doing anything. How do I get you motivated to do what I need you to do and what you said you would do? And so figuring out what they need, the old stick or carrot description. What in that moment, what is it that they need most? Do they need something to be encouraging, to be out in front of them, to say, hey, this is the goal. Don't forget the goal. Don't forget the goal.
Right.
Or how much of it is a motivation of correction to say, hey, we got off track. We got to get back on the track. So let's slow down, be methodical, think about what we're doing, and take baby steps. Now, how that applies in every situation, I don't know, but I think that's the way that I would begin the conversation and begin the process, is to say, okay, what is this person needing most? Are they needing me to give them something to get them accelerated and motivated? Or do they need to pump the brakes because they're running out ahead of where we are?
Yeah, that's going to require, I mean, you know this, but that's going to require building to some degree a culture of the giving and receiving of feedback. Mm-hmm. And making sure that people know on the front end that's going to be a regular part of this. And so asking people how things are going, how are you feeling about this, what's working, what's not working, making sure people know that you're curious about their role in this. And it's not just a set it and forget it. Like, oh man, Todd jumped in and he's doing this thing now, and that's great. And I'm going to let Todd go, and I'm going to let him run, and I'm not going to check in on him. And that's how things spiral in a hurry.
Yeah.
Or it's how you burn people out too.
For sure.
So you've got to be willing to create that culture of feedback.
Yeah. I've got taped to one of my monitors here at my desk a quote from John Maxwell that says, people do not do what you expect. They do what you inspect.
Yeah, that's true.
And so there has to be those clear feedback opportunities for that person to tell you what they think they're doing and how they think it's going, and for you to tell them what you think is happening and how you think it's going, and seeing if those two things are in agreement or not. And if you're not inspecting and you're not articulating the expectation, and then verifying that it's being done, and you just turn people loose with no expectation that you're going to be checking in and see how they think things are going, and how you are assessing that things are going, you are asking for problems.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you have to be clear. You have to be clear, and you have to be clear what you're asking people to do. And there has to be a pursuit of clarity across the board for this to work effectively. And I think also, lastly, there has to be, a desire for humility in this, which is saying, I need help. We need help. And we're going to do this as we go. And I don't have all the answers, and I don't need you to have all the answers, but we're going to work together on it, and we're going to be clear with each other. We're going to be open with each other, and we're going to continue to work towards something really good here. And just, I'll have the humility that if I'm not, if I'm not doing something right that you need from me as the leader, that I'll receive that from you. Right. And I will hear you, and I will do everything I can to make sure that I rise to the level that you need me to get to. And I would ask the same of you. Right. And so having that back and forth expectation of humility will go a long way in building out something healthy. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think it's something that was really foreign in church life for a very long time.
Yeah.
In that we took on the model of the boardroom, and being CEO top down kind of leaders. And while there's a place for some of that,
sure,
I think it has done a big disservice in the life of the church, in the interaction between the pastors and the leadership of the church and the church body as a whole, to be able to say, yeah, we're going to walk this out together, and we want to have conversations, and we do want genuine dialogue. to take place, because that's going to make us better. That's going to make the church better when we're able to be honest and have conversations. But somewhere along the lines that got really difficult to do in a lot of churches, because humility walked away from the conversation.
Yeah.
It was, well, I'm the paid expert, so just do what I say.
Yeah.
Or these are the experts in the business world, and so they're leading the church, and so just do what they say, or whatever it is. Instead of, hey, you bring something to the table. You have a very specific skill set and a very specific gift, and we want to leverage that, where you're able to use your giftedness for the good of the body and for the furthering of the kingdom. And how do we do that? But at the same time, how do we help you? How do we help you develop? How do we help you grow? How do you help me grow? Like, I've not arrived. And so how can you, as the church member, the one who is just desiring to serve, like, how do you help me as one of the pastors? How do you help me grow?
Man, I love that. You're exactly right. I mean, I've seen this play out on so many levels where it kills churches. Mm-hmm. It kills churches. It kills momentum. It kills excitement. It renders a level of ineffectiveness that robs us of being Ephesians 4 churches. Mm-hmm. You know, we're equipping people to do the things that God wants them to do. Instead, what we're saying is, no, we're the equipped ones. You just get in line.
Yep.
That's a terrible place to be, man. Yeah, the sense of humility is so essential in all of this. And it's not easy, which is why we got to have open dialogue and honest conversation. And I think, just lastly, man, to kind of land the plane on this, is I think one of the things that can be super helpful in this process of building a leadership team when you're all alone is when you're asking people to step into certain roles that are helping you manage, but also helping you to plan for the future, especially if you're trying to bring somebody along you're trying to develop into a children's ministry leader, or a worship leader, or a student ministry leader, whatever this kind of higher level you're trying to bring somebody into for the future where you're trying to go. Mm-hmm. I think it's really, really helpful to put timetables on stuff. Create closed-in opportunities. Even if you look at this person and you think, oh man, there's some real long-term potential here. That's great. But just say, hey, let's try this for the next 6 weeks. Let's try this for the next 3 months. Let's move 1 quarter at a time. You know, hey, can you commit to a year? You know, and give people space to know that I'm going to try this, and then we'll evaluate as we go. And if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. And it's no harm, no foul. Thank you. Yep. Because if you can do that, not only are you protecting them, but you're protecting yourself and you're protecting your church. Yep. I mean, I think that's a tremendously helpful guardrail.
It is,
in ensuring that people move in a way that they don't get too far ahead or get left behind, if that makes sense.
Sure. Well, and that also ensures that you don't burn out your folks.
Yeah.
Where you don't just ride them so much that they finally have to stop doing everything that they're doing because they just can't anymore. And so if they know, hey, this is a 1-year commitment, or this is a 6-month commitment, or a 6-week commitment, whatever it is, if they know that it's not a till Jesus comes commitment, then you're much more likely to sustain their connection and their opportunities to serve, even if it's serving in a different way than the way that they're serving right now.
Yeah.
And so that's huge. And then not over serving your people. And what I mean by that is, not just because they'll say yes, don't put them into a ton of spots simply to fill the slots, because you will wear them out.
Yeah.
And you will end up doing a greater disservice than if you just say, you know what, this is the thing that I think you're really good at. So do that thing really, really well. Even if that means that we don't do some of those other things that we'd like to do.
Yeah. You got to move slow, man, and move together. And that's always a better plan in the end. And so our hope is, if you're in this spot where you're kind of flying things solo, that these are some great tips, some great inspiration, some great hope for you on how you can implement some of these day one. And maybe you're doing some of these things. Maybe you've tried and you just feel like they're not working. Try again. Don't give up, because these are proven methods to how we build effective leadership teams. And just apply this to your context, rework it, and use it to cast some vision to some folks in your church. And also, Pastor, we know that when you are leading and flying by yourself, that there are certain parts of this job that are extremely overwhelming. And one of those is dealing with your finances and recognizing that the finances of the church are a massive undertaking. Who's making sure payroll is getting done? Who's making sure all of our vendors are getting paid? Who's ensuring that all of our payroll taxes are above board and getting taken care of? And how do we ensure that all of our giving reports are done? And what about who's handling the online giving? Like, these are all really important questions that demand transparency, and they demand trust, because, man, that's a fast way to kill a ministry, is when these things are not above board, or seemingly not above board, and aren't operating in a really professional and a dependable space. So that's why, man, at Simplify Church, we are here to be those experts for you, to help you outsource that overwhelming part of your job. Like, you don't need this on your plate. And so we can easily come alongside. We can serve your church with nearly done for you bookkeeping and accounting, payroll, and giving, to ensure that, man, that this is one less thing you got to worry about. It's such a blessing to be able to provide this service that we do for hundreds of churches. And so we'd love to be able to set up some time to have a conversation with you about that. You can just head over to our website at simplifychurch.com to get more information, to set up a free call with Josh, who's the CEO of our company. He has been a pastor. He understands pastors, and he would love to be able to serve you in this way. But we hope that these tips, these tricks, these little ideas that we've got that have worked certainly for us are beneficial to you. And as always, we'd love to hear from you. Make sure you rate and review the show on Apple Podcast or Spotify, or you can email us at podcast@simplifychurch.com. We'd love to connect with you. Otherwise, thanks for hanging out with us. We pray this has been a blessing, and we will see you next week.